It is overtime here at Old Favorite Friday, and we are continuing to talk about Cigar City Jai Alai. And I'm talking about a beer from my home state of Florida, from a brewery that I watched come up from its infancy. But I have not done very many Cigar City beers because I don't want to be just a homer, right? I want to make sure we talk about beers from all over the country. So it took my friend here, Craig, from the BAOS podcast, who I met about a year and a half ago. Good branding. It's all about branding.
Part of the monks right here.
And he is down in town doing some business. And I said, hey, Craig, you got to come by. You're a beer guy. You love talking about beer. The inspiration for this series actually came when I was on your podcast. So I figured this is a nice wraparound here, full circle. And you said Cigar City Jai Alai. And I was like, it takes a Canadian to make me talk about a Florida beer. So tell me about this beer. Tell me about what you're thinking about this beer and what you love about it.
Yes, so when I came down here, I wanted to make sure I'm drinking as much local beer as possible. I've been in Canada the whole time through the pandemic, so we wasn't really drinking a lot of American beer, so I missed it. So I was very excited to really get into it, and I was we were at a Publix looking for something for my girlfriend. I even forgot what it was. And I saw the Jai Alai. I checked the date on the box. I'm like, ooh, okay, sick. I wanted to... Everything here, by the way, is in 6 or 4 packs, which is a little bit annoying to me. But that aside, this is not a beer that's a problem in a multi-pack. So I saw it now. I remember being in Dallas, Texas in 2018 after South by Southwest. And I went to a bar with my friend, and they had it on tap, and I was so excited to try it. And then I asked for it, and they tapped it. And I remember it being... I was like, I'm gonna find this damn beer. So to me, whilst I don't have that maybe strong connection that you have with it, I like drinking the classic beers, like also like Two Hearted from Bell's. I've been drinking that here. So this to me is just that classic Floridian IPA. The West Coast style seems to work beautifully in the weather, which on paper doesn't really make a lot of sense. But it works perfectly. It's a high, I think it's 7.5 if I'm not
7.5, yeah. And hides it very well, by the way.
Very well.
I mean, it's basically a double IPA.
Basically.
You know?
But in the small can. I love the format of the can. I love the, it's bright and tropical. It's old school, but still, I feel like it's got a touch. I don't know if they changed it over the years, but it's got a touch of that new school, that juicy tropical hop type of thing happening. I don't know if it's always been that way because I didn't have it 20 years ago.
Right.
Would that be accurate?
Quite possible. It's really, really difficult when you're talking about that. It's a really great point because we've seen so many beers. And in the craft beer industry, you have the ability to change beers and to manipulate due to climate and the hop yield from that year. And there are subtle tweaks that we're always trying to do, I'm speaking from my brewery, to make beers a little bit better. This beer was first produced in 2008.
Okay.
That at least was the first entry into Beer Advocate. For this beer, I might have been a little bit before then, but around that time frame. And I think the beer probably has changed quite a bit. I mean, as Cigar City has grown up. I think that there is some tropical fruit flavor in there, but it also could have been one of the early adopters to that flavor profile.
That's true.
The great thing about this beer for me, and I'm like a broken record on this, there's bitterness here.
Yeah.
There's complexity.
Yes.
There is that nod to that West Coast citrusy hop flavor.
Yes.
But there's also a malt bill that speaks to like a traditional East Coast IPA. Not a New England IPA, but a traditional East Coast IPA. And it kind of wraps it all together in a really nice, palatable way and delivers you a complex beer.
Yes.
I dig the New England hazy style, okay? I like the beers. I'm not trying to put them down. But when all you're getting is, no bitterness and tropical, I think it's a little bit one note. It can be.
That's fair.
This does a lot to give you complexity, drinkability. Once again, 7.5% and drinks like it's a 4%er. I mean, that is skill.
Yeah.
And from the very beginning, Cigar City's always been, they're a pioneer in Florida.
Yeah.
They're one of the ones that really set the bar here, and then breweries like Funky Buddha came along and really took this to a point where you can find this beer all over the place. So you said, was it the first time you ever encountered the beer was in Texas?
That was when it was on tap at a bar my friend took me to. And I don't recall when I first tried it. I would hazard a guess it would have been somewhere probably up northeast, whether it was Vermont, maybe New York, something like
sense.
that. And I always, if I ever saw it, I would have grabbed it. So I don't remember the exact first time, but I always remember being attracted to it because it was, for me being up there, hard to get, even though here it's literally in supermarkets.
Yeah.
And on every bar, it was definitely hard to get. And I've had this, I don't know about, it sounds like and I recall from our conversations on the pod, you've had this like longer term appreciation for maybe the classic beers where I feel like I got caught up in the trends a bit and, I've come full circle in the sense that like two of my favorite styles right now are like pilsners, like classic Czech pilsners, and West Coast IPAs.
Yeah.
And I find myself reaching for these more often, and I've been delighted to have a 6-pack of this in the fridge at the Airbnb, as well as Two Hearted, and they're just beautiful beers that I feel like just aren't as appreciated right now, and maybe it's because of having that experience of all of the pastries and smoothies and haze and all that stuff, that this hits in a way that maybe it hasn't in quite some time.
Well, I mean, if we're doing it right, and not just with beer, I'm going to get a little philosophical here, but if we're doing it right, we're going to evolve, right? Our tastes are going to evolve, our mentality is going to evolve, we're going to want to learn and try new things. And listen, if you like a thing and you just want to drink that one thing consistently,
do it up.
do it up. I mean, I have nothing to say about that. You're enjoying yourself. But when you're on a kind of a journey of craft beer and you want to try new things, maybe you tried something early on and said, man, this thing isn't for me, but then you revisit it 5-6 years later, physiologically your tastes have changed, right? Everything changes about it, the presentation of it. And I think it's so amazing to try some of these more classic styles. And I love seeing them come back. You mentioned the West Coast IPA. We're talking about the influences here. You mentioned those as being one of your favorites. We just did a West Coast IPA, a collaboration with the Tank Brewing. Nice. It's going to be out in a month or so from a Belgian brewery, right? We are doing IPAs. We are doing some beers without Belgian yeast, but that was the style when we were talking internally, me, my head brewer Ralph, that's what we wanted to do, because there's not a lot of straight West Coast IPAs out there that we can find, or the influences aren't as strong as they were 10 years ago. So what was old is now new again, right?
Yeah.
We want to try them out, introduce some people, and I guarantee people they're going to try this and go, I've never had anything like that before. And for me, who's like an old man in this industry, I'm like, I remember when every single beer tastes exactly like this.
That's a really good point. I felt like I've seen more West Coast here in the last, say, almost 4 weeks I've been in Florida. I've seen more than I anticipated. So, but maybe you're looking at it from a broader perspective where maybe it isn't as common then. Is that what you're saying? Like it's really not that common?
It's certainly not as common in commercial beers, right? If I'm going to go out there and try to find something on a store shelf. Now, I'm not saying that there's not tons of craft breweries all over Florida, in my hometown, that have a West Coast IPA on their tap room.
Right.
I'm basically a shut-in at this point. I have a 5-year-old. I don't leave my house. I come to work and then I go home. So there might be a lot of that out there. Obviously, I know about the Pilsners becoming very popular. Pretty much every brewery is doing a lager now. And when you get away from Florida, I might as well be blind. I have no idea what's happening.
Gotcha.
But it's encouraging when people are revitalizing and going after a classic style, putting their own spin on it, changing it up a little bit, putting your own flavor into it's really important. You're not just trying to say, I want to make, Pliny the Elder. If you just want to do that, that's good too. But I like when say, I like a little bit of this, I like a little bit of this, so I try something out. I'd like to know a little bit about your podcast.
Yes.
Because I was on the show. My partner Matt Manthe at Aubrey was on the show. Tell us a little bit about BAOS.
Yes, sir. So we started about 8 years ago, 2015. We were one of the first craft beer podcasts in Canada, fortunately, so it worked out pretty well. We essentially interview craft breweries from around the world. Pre-2020, we were traveling everywhere and doing everything in person. 2020 onwards, we've just moved to virtual, and it's kind of become a lot easier because then we wouldn't have been able to have you on unless I was out here. So then it sort of opened up the world, and one thing we do now is we make sure we drink the same beers to create that sort of like synergy, and we're like experiencing the same thing at the same time, just not being in the same place. So that's something that we do primarily, obviously the audio and video side, and we have a YouTube channel where we do, like right now I'm filming like a where to drink craft beer in South Florida. So just wherever we've been, there's fire. We just taking some B-roll. We talk about it. That content does well. It's just like been my side project. It's become like one of our main things that we do, and we've been, because it's been so long, we're probably close to 400 episodes now throughout the different series. So that's a lot of hours yapping about beer. And you talk to some really cool people. Obviously now we're here in person after doing 2 pods, and it's very cool. Like it's one of my favorite things to do now for the people, but also just for the industry and discovering. Like it's just so much fun. And I haven't done the exploring for a while because
for obvious reasons.
Yeah. And dude, I missed it so much. Like this has been one of the coolest experiences for a while, and it's been such a long one. Like we went for probably like 5 weeks, I guess, all up, and then we're going to go back to Canada over 5 days. So exploring a bunch of cities on the way up, and loving it, man. Loving Florida. Very impressed with the place itself, but obviously the beer here in Florida is spectacular.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on and doing a little episode with us, talking about an old favorite beer.
Yes.
I highly recommend, please check out their podcast, BAOS Podcast. Go back into the archive. The great thing about podcasts, you can listen to me. You can listen to me talk for an hour or so about craft beer if you're interested in that. But check them out. Check out their social media and give them a like, a follow. Give us a like and a follow. Please poke around on our channel. See all the other great conversations we're having about these amazing, incredible, classic craft beers that sometimes we don't appreciate as much as we absolutely should. And we'll see you next week.
Cheers.
Cheers.